support towards the health sector immediately of our people. The Americans provide government have been arrested, and when you examine some of the cases under which have been charged, they don't even make sense. Of course, some of them we can't discuss in detail because they're in court, but when you look at the indictment, you look at the evidence and everything, you know that this is politically motivated. You can never have a genuine fight against corruption that only focuses on what you think your friends did. The real fight against corruption when you get into government that will really be genuine is the one that deals with the happening face. Those that are easy because all you need is to look at what people did when they were in government. But real complicated corruption is the one that is happening at the time that we're in government, because you must be committed to check the system, to check how things are being done. How is it that we can have, for example, a challenge in the agriculture sector in the sense that we had enough stocks that would 2-3 years had drought? We will not have the excuse, quote unquote, of saying that each went to countries like Tanzania and other places a year later, because also the chain of supply for inputs and so on was also destabilized because of politics. Certain individuals or companies that were traditionally for many years and decades been in that business were labeled PF and therefore terminated and so on, recklessly without thinking of the consequences. We ended up with the first year of the first season of UPN being in government, a disaster in terms of production. Second year, a disaster in terms of, are referred to as an excuse. And we've ended up a hungry. So I can only say, Mr. Lucci, is that it's a sum total of exposure, that lack of experience in government, and inclination towards politicking outside the very precious values that each and every citizen must have, especially those who offer themselves for public service as politicians, the virtue of patriotism, love for your country, to a point where if you are ushered into office, we should never get into these offices and start what you do to benefit or to promote yourself. It should be on, when you get into office, what is it that I can do for the issues which deal with the livelihood of our people. And I think it's a very sad development.
I agree with you. In fact, so one of the things I remember before 2021 or during that period leading up to the election, speaking to those of you who were in PF, I remember some of your colleagues used to say that, listen, there is corruption, yes, but that corruption isn't being by leadership, officials of, or like high senior ranking ministers, etc., etc., but that there is corruption within the civil service. In a way, you could make the argument that is the case even today, that there is corruption, it's within the civil service, but there's not much that's being done. I mean, it's not like when you were in government as a party, what you did in terms of trying to figure out where are these loopholes within the civil service. Similar story today. It doesn't feel like there's a lot that's being done in terms of trying to figure out where those loopholes are. So how do we go forward when it clearly looks like there are officials that may not be party members, but that people that work in the civil service are the ones who are responsible for some of the leakages and the pilferage that's happening?
That's basically agreeing with me. In the sense that the so-called fight against corruption has been politicized. We use it to weaponize, the citizen against one group of or set of politicians, because the ones who are in government, and to that effect, if we talk about corruption, we want to name prominent politicians and try and see if we can use the judicial system to get to dent them, and so on and so forth. You are right that the entire system that needs overhaul. The starting point is, are we able to change the narrative and the policy position as politicians? So this thing is not seen from a partisan point of view, but as a problem that we should accept, that maybe it has gotten embedded within the systems. My sister, Rora Miti, wrote something, I think you saw it circulating, where she was saying, okay, it's not just the drugs that have been stolen. You can go even to simple things like just or indeed the main campus, where to get a room, you have to pay hefty amounts of money.
And it doesn't just end there. I mean, look at CDF as an example.
Yeah.
You see council officials giving questionable answers, and you start wondering, but wait, what is the issue in this country?
So in this, because of lack of patriotism, somehow even the nobility of people offering themselves for public office is no longer there. The justing for position and to become whether president, MP, and all this has become so commercial. You understand? It's like now we have accepted the myth, which is not correct, and they were passing on to the next generation, that actually to become a politician is the most lucrative thing you can ever do. When in fact, it's the most draining thing you can ever involve yourselves in. Those who have been business people and genuinely they offer themselves for public service, not to go and steal, they will tell you that they ended up losing more in politics than they gained. Okay? Unless you get into politics and start stealing, maybe it will be lucrative. To politics and public office for purposes of saving, you will walk away even more poorer than you went in. That's how come most of the MPs, and if you do the statistics, we should actually sympathize with politicians. Most of the MPs, they look affluent because maybe they have a car loan they'll get after getting to office. And as Africans and Zambians, we celebrate liabilities, we celebrate clothes, we celebrate cars, we celebrate all these things that really don't matter. And it's just for a short period of time. After 5 years of being in office, and they are using that vehicle in their constituencies, especially for those whose constituencies are far in rural areas, by the time they are finishing their 4 years, they are tired, just like the vehicle they got on loan is also tired. If they don't have the opportunity to continue, that's how come you have MPs who have been in parliament for close to 25 years. They don't see themselves surviving outside parliament. Why? Because they are drained every other day. 2-3 months of being out of parliament, people, you can't recognize them. So what I'm saying is that there is an aspect of what we're discussing that is true. We need to focus on this. We need the fight against corruption, which is holistic, not the fight against corruption, which is a political tool to beat your opponents.
We're obviously going into elections next year, but is that the message that if we win in 2026, that having learned these lessons, that this is what we want to do?
Yes,
let me tell you what I've always said. I've always said, and I know no politician will ever agree with me because you're obviously afraid to lose votes, but I've always said, as somebody who has zero interest in getting into politics, I've always said that what we need is someone to come and say, we are going to revamp the civil service. We are going to cut as many people as we can, restart, rejig the entire civil service. Because what we've seen over the past 61 years is just not good.
But you see, the solutions towards, for example, the revamping of the civil service, the reason why it has not been, historically, it seems that it is anchored sometimes on wrong considerations. You understand? You come into office and all of a sudden you begin to think that the reason the civil service is the way it is because these are civil servants that belong to this political party. And sometimes, dangerously so, there is even consideration that these civil servants are operating like this because they belong to this particular ethnic grouping and all that. Invite alien but dangerous undertones that sabotage a good idea of working in the civil service as a people of Zambia. Okay? Moving forward is not a set of politicians and leaders who are going to be presenting new promises. It's rhetoric. Zambia is blessed to be a country that has some of the best smart men and women in terms of capacity and intellectual sector. When you go to other jurisdictions, you find that smart Zambians are good lady who's basically now recognized in the UK, who was an economic advisor to Paul Kagame, for example. Dhamisa Moyo. She's not the only one. There are many who may not have been as prominent and announced as she is, but they are all over the world. Okay? So when it comes to policy, when it comes to what we need to do, even if you just went to the set introspection to see how we have traversed from the past 60 years, where did we miss it? So that even when we tackle the issues of civil service, should not be from the perspective of these undertones of tribe, ethnicity, and political and so on, to put in place a system that encourages professionalism on the part of those that join the civil service. Are dealt with not from a perspective of political rhetoric. That's the solution. Two, as politicians, how is it that now we have gotten to a place where to aspire and seek political office is a life and death situation? Because there is no way, if at all you are seeking to serve, to get in that office having named somebody, having paid people to engage in various activities and so on. What is the motivation? Why do you want that office so much that you can act and so on? That's the question we should be asking ourselves. Why should I seek to be Secretary General, that because of wanting to be Secretary General I should name people? What is in this office that would warrant me shed blood? So it is all those issues that must be examined for our country to be whipped back to a place of decency, to focus on what is important other than some of these things that we are playing with. So we keep on making efforts and attempts. There has even been a deliberate indoctrination that we unfortunately have accepted. People have preached from who have survived through politics that politics are dirty. And all of us accept as a citizen that politics are dirty. That philosophy only as a blanket to justify the wrong things that people do in the name of politics. It can never be that public service is dirty. Public service is supposed to be undertaking for those who offer themselves for it. And it should be done in such a way that the focus is the citizens, what you do to better their lives.
Is that why as a party, maybe just as opposition generally, I haven't heard much in terms of is that a new thinking that you have to say, listen, it's been done before, and as we've seen in the past 3-4 years, they haven't come to fruition. So maybe we're better off just not offering any promises.
I think for me, one of the things that impressed me on President Edgar Chagwa Lungu, obviously politics about communication and talking, but he seemed to have been shy to engage more in talk. Remember, he was even criticized for saying, wow, you're asking of a vision, I don't have a vision. I'm committed to the collective vision of Patriotic Front, and espoused, by people cut off by saying I don't have my own vision, and they played around.
I made the argument that I don't think that you can be a leader without a vision of your own. He was sitting around. I made that argument.
Yeah, but you see, the issue is that the moment you begin to promote individuals as a champion for this cause, it may sound myopic, but I think as a country agree of the collective goal, collective vision, that the only thing that you argue about is implement the policy position on how to tackle this, but the vision still remain constant. Then progress. So you have the leap into government, Kaunda is deemed to be the vision carrier. His ideas and whatever he's thinking is what should go. And when Chiruba comes, whatever Kaunda was doing was rubbish. His vision cannot compare to mine. I have a better vision. Therefore, everything is rubbish under Kaunda. And then you begin to follow this gentleman with his promises and so on and so forth. Everybody within the organization, including in MMD in this case, similarly, by cultural arrangement, follow an individual than to encourage systems to be strong to control and direct the individual. That's where the is. So when he leaves office, even when it is within the same party, how come within the party of, for example, we had Manawasa take over? What was the disposition? You know, many allegations are being raised. How is it that it is within the organization? It's like a new government has come in, but it's the same party. You understand what I'm saying? It only speaks to the fact that maybe we need to revisit that. Even institutions of government today, are you not concerned, Mr. Lucci, at the discussions and issues around the three arms of government? What is happening in Parliament? What is happening at the judiciary? Now, the expose in terms of how the executive are managing issues. It should be of concern. Why do we have that are supposed to be strong, operating independent or at least autonomously to advance, for example, the principle of checks and balances?
None of you leaders have and said this is what we want to do. We want to strengthen, these institutions. And for me, that's what I've said this before. I said this to when he was in opposition. I said to him once, I said, listen, what I would like to see outside of all these talks about the economic, all of these things, what I'd like to see is strong institutions. Because if you don't have strong institutions, then you failed. As a country, we failed because we're not. You need to see one that is independent, one that does not have to answer to you as president. You need to have a strong DEC. You need to have a strong judiciary. And unfortunately, over the years, over the 61 years, we just haven't been serious enough to make these institutions independent and strong enough that they are not under the will of the president. Yeah.
Unfortunately, made fantastic, promises and commitments at the time that he was in opposition, and under his watch, the situation has even worsened. If you had that kind of discourse with him, the question that we all are asking.
But I've had this discourse with all of you.
Yeah, I understand, but I mean, you're talking to me as secretary. But for him, president, and the first thing he did weeks after getting into office was to pass a statutory instrument 1120 to get all the law enforcement agencies, particularly SEC, the police, and others, to be directly under his office. What he was promising. And we have heard, unlike his, predecessor, who insisted, I don't want to interfere with the SEC. And he was being criticized because the opposition, you haven't arrested that one. How come? It's like he is the one who should go and arrest those who are alleged to be corrupt. He restrained and said that the SEC, police, everybody, operate independently. And we seem to be a weak leader. Office. There is even direct interference. SEC, can you operate quietly, arrest and whatever, or can you do this directly? Instructions being given, around law enforcement, which is not supposed to be the case. Remember, I was arrested by the police. The president had a 2-hour press briefing. My expose about some of the activities which were going to threaten the principle of separation of powers. And I was arrested, transported to Solways and all that. I can only, as a citizen, take it. It is because the president instructed. The police did not act out of their professional and independent judgment whether it was an offense. How many times have I been arrested? Over 22 times. I have been summoned to the police over 30 times. And each of the cases that have been given are cases to do with seditious practice. For example, we have evidence of the fact that the government imported toxins, which a professional journalist undertook some investigative activities and found that the chemical makeup that was in the maize and meal dogs, and obviously we could not quantify, verify the numbers of human beings that have been affected. I make a comment, a strong to call upon government to take in interest, because this amounts to genocide against your own citizens. Instead of taking what I've said in good stride, in one vein, Tabokawan admits, yes, there are these milling companies are even named, and confirms that whatever. Even the minister at the time, or what is his name, Elijah Mtima, also confirms. I even attempt, because it is lives, I attempt to call the minister to say you can't dying. What happens? Because of political consideration, they look at what I have said from a perspective that's damaging for us as a government. Go and arrest him. Arrest me for what? For telling the truth? And I have to appear in court. This approach to politics and to policy that is causing us to degenerate, go backwards instead of making progress. So PND has worsened. I agree with you that there are issues that must be from the collective as a people, and we must address them squarely. But you see, at any given time, when people are in office, those issues that must be looked at collectively as a people, they must have the courage to sit down and say, do we need an what for yet for Zambians to come and speak to these issues? Because then, using that fora, you can begin to rally the country collectively that this is the direction should take. Even if I left office, even if this set of leaders leave office, I think this we must agree we can never tolerate. How is it that today the lives of millions of Zambians, by just one stroke of the American ambassador plugging out that aid, we are totally disoriented? 60 years down the line, how come we have to have everything supplied from foreigners? Everything. There's nothing we're producing. When did we discover there's HIV/AIDS? Over 30 or so years ago. We are still depending on ARVs and these from outside the country. How is it that Indians and all these other countries have always found a way in which they will do research and find mitigation measures, whether medicine or otherwise, to be able to administer to their citizens to deal with the challenges other than depending on foreigners? So they focus on development. Yes. So we are busy quarreling and become aid dependent. We are quarreling over petty issues. The mining sector has remained in the hands of foreigners for over 6 years. Before we were born. And 61 years, after, even having produced competent hands to run these entities, we are still under the thumb of foreigners. How? Who can justify that? Nakachinda and Hon, who came on the platform of saying, I'm a new generational leader, and you go and without any justification, and when you look at even just a scandal than the sector, Kabuswe called on this platform with that Chipoka Mrenga to challenge me, vendetta, this Indian has come, see in the next 1 month, everything will be done. I challenge him, can we meet? It was Chimweka seated here. Mr. Kabuswe, can you come on this forum after 1 month? I'll tell you there will still be a disaster in Chingola. Haven't I been justified? The answer is yes. Is there anything going on in KCM? The answer is no. What has happened with Mopani? Disaster. Is the company, the so-called company, to invest in Mopani anything that is credible? The answer is no. How can you have an investor who needs to be given a lift by the government to come and invest in your country? And how can we be making such disastrous decisions as a people? Surely. How? And we are now complaining over how much? $50 million. Which is 1.4 billion kwacha. Luchi, One small mine in the Republic of Zambia produces that $50 million every month. Every month. But here we are, totally stated, the lives of people on the line, because our priorities are somewhere else. Petty arguments, petty quarrels, fights. We have a former president mistreated as though his service to this country for 7 years was all rubbish, all in the name of one. That man could have benefited in the and looked at his governance approach from a perspective of patriotism, where you benefit from everybody. We can't have a country that kills its talented people, kills its own people who have innovation. In this country, business and are seemingly succeeding, you are either going to be accused of, if not satanism, if you can't get anything, then corruption. If that's what we're doing. We don't want progress, and because we don't want progress at personal level, we become collective. We don't want progress at national. We charge ourselves, and we seem to celebrate when foreigners, succeed. The Americans have said we're taking away our money. This is a wake-up call for everybody, especially politicians. Should we always be stuck when somebody was assisting us leave? How is it that we are comfortable to continue sucking from the rest of aid? How is it that we are continuously to run to IMF? How is it that the talk of government is always about being bailed out? Even when we have enough that God has given us to be able to come out of this situation. As young man going towards his 40s, he, of course, the method through which he got into government may not really, the arrangement be supported. That's not the issue. But at least the decisions he has made, Taure, in Burkina Faso, within a year and some, able to pay debt. He has cleaned up the balance of Burkina Faso. What was the decision? We have our resources. Can we control the resources? Can we come to the market, the global market, on an equal foot with our resources? Come with your money. Can you trade? Pay,
fair value.
Fair value for what you are getting from us. Simple decisions. See also the Mopani. The investors are, were able to run it, and he got Mopani. The people that fought Isio, Isizame. That Mopani alone, looking at the investment and the lifespan of that mine in the hands of Zambians, we would not be dealing with the $50 million aid that has been plucked out and we're crying all over. We should have been able to use that mine to be able to even deal the debt. Coupled with KCM, under the data, not only under Miringo, but even in time past, when there was another charge of that mine before the so-called investors were coming, the suppliers, workers were being paid without the disruption of payments, and suppliers only came when the so-called investors came, who supposedly expected to bring more money into the mine. But that's where the difficulty is. So I think there's something wrong among ourselves which needs to be addressed. And I might need another, big push towards patriotism as a people, but also that God should bless us after 2026 of a set of leaders that are patriotic, ready to do thing, even if it costs them an election, even if it costs them whatever incentives you can talk about. That's the way you need to go. When you do the right thing, you don't have to campaign. The type of is by just the actions he has taken and the benefits so far in Burkina Faso towards his people. He is now a hero. I was privileged to go to West Africa a few months ago where there was some immigration. Not even who was elected in that country was being celebrated as much as Traore was being celebrated. They are not celebrating Traore because he carries a gun. They are celebrating Traore because he has done the right thing which other people are afraid to do. And we are saying, can you summon courage to do the right thing?
It's a little long, but I want to read your question. This is from Chewe Zindola. He says, our biggest weakness in Zambia is we look at things from a political lens. Both the ruling party and opposition look to blame each other. It's important for us to look at issues from a Zambian point of view. What we seem to lack is patriotism. It is irresponsible for us to say the PF or the UPND failed on issues. We need to start having the difficult conversations and ask to corruption. In my view, it's poverty. We generally have low incomes. Even people in formal employment have low incomes, yet the wealthy are. We deal with the root cause of poverty reduction. I strongly believe we will continue to fumble as a people. In narrative, be about if this policy was implemented, we would reduce. So my question to the SG: what major policy do?
Major policy, first of all, the economy must be owned by Zambians. The economy must be in the hands of Zambians. We should begin to celebrate the prosperity of the citizens of the Republic of Zambia. That's one thrust leadership we must not shy away from promoting. If there's an opportunity for Mr. to become a billionaire in dollar terms, even if it's the only one we can produce, let's push with everything to produce. Because after all, your money will be localized. There is no way Mr. Luchi, if he became a billionaire, you eat all that money. It's not possible. That money eventually has to be benefit those who buy from, benefit. It's a chain. That's how the economy, improves. How is it that Chinese, they come to Africa, but they still bank in China? And they even push that for us to do all the transactions, they force governments, because obviously now with the economic strength, they'll force governments to even introduce the Bank of China in Zambia, because the principle remains simple, straightforward. The monies every Chinese generates across the world has to end up in what? China. And if China strengthens their currency and they are able to compete favorably, position in Zambia first is that the economy must be in the hands of Zambians. That is fundamental. And to deal with the poverty of our people. The trick which you fell in 19 of going full throttle 100% privatization without balancing it with the need to have private capital, but also to have the Zambian people through government to maintain a share within the industrial base. That radical decision is what came and wiped out our industrial base. It did not produce anything. I remember I was joking with one member of parliament. I don't want to embarrass him today, maybe he may permit to mention his name, Marimu Simfuko. He used to be member of parliament from Bala. He used to be our chairman in the budget committee at parliament. I'll joke with the chair. I'll come with the tree packs, the traditional wear that usually are used. Because there's nothing that produced locally that we. So here, Mr. Luchi, from the lotion you used, the soap you used, the we're wearing, in and out, they are all foreign. And we are proud to even go and buy. But do you know what it is? You're actually exporting jobs. Because the textile industry in the country where these clothes we're wearing are coming from, we have the best climate. We produce some of the best, raw material, in this case, cotton and all this. We don't promote. There's no thrust that speaks to patriotism, because even empowering Zambians is part of the virtue of patriotism. A desire to make sure that the sum total of the economy first must be in the hands of Zambians. then they can make a choice to partner with foreigners. But we can't have a situation where the sum total of our economy, you are even proudly doing so as a government, to usher your economy in the hands of foreigners, and you think you have achieved. By foreigners, I don't want to sound racist, but there are politicians who think that taking a photo with a man is such a great achievement in life. You understand what I'm saying? That kind of mentality should never find itself in argument. So the first policy from my brother who sent a message is that we must first insist that they in the hands of Zambians.